Welcome. This is the Vektor T13. In this video, we will take a look at a new product from Vektor T13 Technologies, a virtual AntiDetect router. This project is available on GitHub, and its source code is completely open. This project was made as an alternative to the current methods of proxy, more powerful and more correct from the point of view of network traffic formation. After all, it would seem, why do you need a proxy? All you have to do is change your IP address. We think so and have thought all along. But in fact, the moment you communicate with a web resource, how often you send requests, what structure these requests are, and so on, all this can form an opinion about you on the part of a web resource as a bot, for example. Interestingly, many users think that the biggest problem is that they can't bypass the anti-fraud system, when in fact they can't even bypass the anti-bot system, which simply doesn't trust their devices because they use, for example, a not-so-good proxy system. So from words to deeds, what does this project consist of and how can it be configured? This project is just one script. You can check out its content on GitHub, you can improve this script. Everywhere there are relevant comments. What is being set, what firewall rules are being set, what are the routing rules, and so on. Complete openness to the user. This is the first component you need. The second component you need is the operating system that will be installed here. We will use the official operating system from OpenWRT. OpenWRT are firmware for our physical routers, firmware that allows us to use many new features that are not available and that are not necessary for the average user. That is, for example, installing a VPN, installing proxies of various types, subtle traffic routing rules to bypass blocking, and so on. In our guide and in our video, we will use OpenWRT version 24.10.4. By the way, I recommend paying attention to the README file. I have tried to describe here as much as possible everything that you need. In particular, you can find all the necessary requirements here. And a complete description of this project. Actually, during the installation phase, we see the operating system that we need. And here, I want to immediately draw attention to the first pitfall. If we click on this link, we will have a large number of different versions for different router chipsets. I recommend choosing the only one that suits us. This is the x86-64 version. And here it is, at the very top is the generic X4 combined EFI. You can accordingly find this name in the README file. So we have the script, the operating system, or rather the operating system image. We already have it downloaded to our computer, and we need something else. We will need the resource that we will turn into this virtual router. In particular, we will use VPS. We need VPS in order to put this point between us and the web resource we need. Regarding the choice of VPS, I would like to draw your attention to two interesting points. The first point, I recommend choosing the VPS of the country you are going to work in. That is, for example, if you will want to work, for example, on Amazon USA, conditionally. Accordingly, choosing a VPS that is located in Mongolia or North Korea will not be very right for you. And in the same way, choosing a US VPS when you want to work, for example, on Amazon Japan will also not be entirely correct. If you choose a VPS that will serve as a virtual router for us in the country in which you will work, you can get additional benefits in the form of reduced latency, jitter, and of course increased speed, which should not be forgotten, because nowadays speed is very important for to determine who is in front of the anti-bot system, bot or real user. In my example, I'll use a resource called DigitalOcean. It is a well-known resource, but in our aspect, this resource has a big disadvantage. The disadvantage is that you cannot use the IPv6 protocol on this resource. And here I will tell you in more detail. A virtual router project, it fully supports the IPv6 protocol stack. That is, you can use IPv6, DNS, WebRTC, Web Transport, Quick Protocol, absolutely everything without any problems. But unfortunately, DigitalOcean does not give us this option, since we will use a custom operating system and not one of those that it has in its arsenal. I choose DigitalOcean in this case as an all-in-one example because it's so easy to work with and show on. You can do the same on any other hosting service that supports IPv6 protocols in custom operating systems. The first thing we need to do is choose a droplet, or choose to create a VPS depending on the syntax of the service you'll be working with. I'll show you how to create a droplet on DigitalOcean because, again, it's the most informative. In this case, the droplet will be a VPS server. When you upload your custom operating system image, you upload it to a specific data center. Therefore, in my case, I will choose New York data center number 3, which is indicated, respectively, here. Further down, I go down where I have an operating system choice, I select custom images, and I have a few images here. ASUS router image, MikroTik image, and OpenWRT image. Here, these images, they were uploaded by me. I repeat, they were not originally in this service. I choose my custom image and then the processor. And based on DigitalOcean as a great example, I'd like to draw your attention to the same feature that you might encounter when working with other VPS providers. The fact is that depending on which instance you choose, you may get different internet connection speeds. Let me give you an example. If you and I choose the cheapest instance for $4 a month, we get only 100 megabits of our network, which is 100 megabits, a 100 megabit channel. But if we choose, for example, Premium Intel, which costs twice as much, $8 a month, then we already get a single gigabit channel. Then there is another important point. My router will use two types of VPN connections. One VPN connection is a client server, that is, to our VPN router. This VPN connection is not encrypted. I turn it off deliberately. I will explain why. Because in order to use encryption, the processor takes part in encrypting traffic, because it needs to decrypt this traffic. Accordingly, if we use traffic encryption, we will have a lot of CPU load, which will reduce our transfer speed on the network. Therefore, in my case, the client server is not encrypted. That is, we have already relieved the load on the network by 50%. But there is one more point. There is a point that is that the server that is from our VPN router to the proxy will also be a VPN connection, and this VPN connection, its encryption will be controlled not by our router, but by the receiving party. And here, accordingly, there may already be encryption, which will be a load on your processor. So, I recommend paying attention to this and, if possible, talking to the owner of the proxy service you are using so that they disable encryption. In fact, of course, this is bad from the security point of view because your traffic can be intercepted and decrypted. But I think that if you don't have a large number of enemies who want to catch what you specifically buy on Amazon, then there is no point in spending extra resources in order to let's say, sacrifice your connection speed. That's why we choose Premium Intel. I always choose, for example, here is either 2 GB, 1 CPU, or 2 GB, 2 CPUs. In this case, it all depends on which VPS service you use. Prices can be found completely different. Well, for those who are a little smarter than everyone else, it will not be difficult to find paid VPS on services like Google absolutely for free. Next is the connection method. The connection method we have is either an SSH key or a password. If we set a password, it is possible that our instance will not be created. That is, on DigitalOcean, for example, you can't create it using a password because it will tell you that this operating system image does not support password authorization and you need an SSH key. If you create your instance, i.e. your VPS image, using an SSH key, you will still not succeed. Why? Because OpenWRT does not have a section for SSH keys. That is, you will not connect either way. Therefore, in my case, I use an SSH key, but just choose some fake one that has no meaning and is not used anywhere. I won't even use it to connect. After that, assign a name to this instance and click the Create button. In a few minutes, we will have our finished droplet. So, our droplet has been successfully created. We can see its parameters at the top, we can see the data center that is installed, its name, and we can also see the operating system, in this case OS OpenWRT. What do we need to do now? If we try to connect to this IP address using SSH, we will not succeed because there is no internet on this droplet yet. How do we launch it? For this, we have our great guide. Let's use it according to the guide. If we pay attention to the installation item, we can see that we need to connect through the recovery console. Let's do it. Select Access, launch Recovery Console. And we will continue to do very stupid work with you. We will just enter the commands that we see in the guide like monkeys. Press Enter. This is the Recovery Console just in case. All services have it. I haven't met a single one that doesn't have it. So what do we do? The first thing we need to do is to copy this line. Again, in the case of cool haters who may be watching this video, I am not focusing on you in this video, since you could probably do all this yourself, but I am focusing on people who, perhaps, for the first time in their lives, see the shell window. So we've entered our first line, we've entered our second line. Just in case the right mouse button does not work for you, then enter through Ctrl-V. And they introduced our third line. We are finally raising the internet. Eat! We raised the internet. We can already connect with SSH at this stage, but we don't have a password. So we could in principle log in without a password. But I recommend putting it right away. I will explain why. Because the VPS is constantly being scanned for access to them. Therefore, the sooner you set a password, the safer it will all be. I'll set the password now to Vektor T13. Looking ahead, I will say that it does not make much sense to use a 20-digit password here at this stage. Why? Because then, this password will be used to access the administrative console. Therefore, now we have set the Vektor T13 password for our VPS and will try to make the connection. For which we will use PuTTY software. You can use any other. We agree with certificate threat, enter the root login, and enter the Vektor T13 password. Eat! We are inside, we have access to our VPS. We can close the emergency window, the emergency console window for the moment, and we'll continue to use only our PATI. We've set a password with you, connected using SSH, and we'll need to install a few utilities manually. The first thing we do, OPKG update. We are updating our repositories. Since OpenWRT is the same as Linux, the principle here is exactly the same, that apt-get, that OPKG, is only different syntax. Next, OPKG install curl. Install the first additional utility, it is installed. Next, OPKG install buget. And we installed the second utility, and we even had it already installed. Now let's move on. Our server is ready to go. Just a second. Now let's move on to point number 5. And now we are going to execute this big command that will download this script from GitHub specified in its root. Let's go back to point number 5. Copy our command to shell. The download completed successfully. That is, at the moment, if we enter the ls command, we will see our script, which is on the server. The next thing we need to do is provide, set the owner of the script and run the script. This script is like Road Warrior, it will allow you to do everything completely for you. Press enter and we started creating our router. All the necessary utilities, all the necessary packages are installed. And if you need any interaction with the user, the script will inform you about it and display it on the screen. The whole process takes plus or minus 2 minutes. Wait for the first moment of interaction with the user. All necessary packages are installed automatically. Most of them do not have hardcode, so when they are updated, they will be updated on their own. Plus, if you suddenly need something yourself, you can fork this script on GitHub and add there, accordingly, the package you need, which you want to install additionally. At the moment, language packs are being installed. At the moment, this router is available in English, Russian, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Spanish. So the first moment of interaction with the user is entering a password. We can enter some custom password, or press enter and leave the default password. The default password is the password we set in the emergency console. I installed Vektor T13. You can install any other. I won't change it at the moment, so I'll just press enter. Next, an additional installation takes place. Passwall software is a proxy client in this case. Quite powerful software. In my opinion, I will say that I have never seen a more powerful project in terms of fine-tuning the proxy. Well, for VPN we use the OpenVPN project. Waiting for the installation and download and installation of Passwall. This may take some time. So next, configuration of our incoming VPN. This is the VPN that you will use to connect to this router. Leave the default port. Client's name. There is only one client. I will replace him, for example, with 33 conditionally. Subnet leave it, press enter. IPv6 subnet, press enter in the same way. And our VPN has already been created. Plus, we have a small guide here that you can read. You can see the address of your web panel. Let's check it right away. Go to this IP address. As a reminder, this is the IP address of our instance. So, here is our web interface from our router. Enter the password. Vektor T13. I entered it, you may have a different password. And here we are inside our router. The first launch is sometimes a little long. Next, in addition to the main web panel, we also have the simplest web panel for downloading a VPN. Here she is. The same IP address, but with the VPN prefix at the end. This web page will allow you to automatically download your OpenVPN config so that you don't need to enable SSH, SFTP and connect inside your virtual router. Just click Download Third-VPN, and accordingly the OVPN file will be downloaded here. There is also a little background information about what access is required from the web panel. So, what are we going to do next? At the moment, our router is completely ready for operation. There's also an additional script that can restore the default traffic, but in most cases, 99% and 9%, you won't need it. Therefore, in fact, that's all at the moment. The only thing that you can still pay attention to is that you need to turn on the so-called main switch when you work with proxies. But I will show you about this and tell you about it a little later. So, the router is completely ready to work, we can close it, we no longer need it. All other actions will be performed only in the web panel. So, at the moment, the first action that we will perform with you is we will check our IP address. Our IP address is now 249.35.153. And our task is to check how our VPN works. Accordingly, I will now connect using the client file that I downloaded from our server. And if everything is fine, then our IP address should change, my IP address, to the IP address of our VPS, our virtual router. I make a connection. So, our VPN is successfully connected. Let's test it in action. We refresh the page, and here we see that our IP address has changed to the IP address of our router. This is our first VPN from which we connect to our router. You can see that even here, I made the TCP IP fingerprint as similar as possible to the fingerprint of the Windows operating system. That being said, even if I turn off the VPN, I'll have less windows than with this VPN. Next, about DNS. Our DNS works in transparent proxying mode. That is, now, as you understand, I do not have DNS from DigitalOcean in reality, but the DNS of my native provider. When you connect a VPN, we don't use OpenDNS or Google DNS. DNS queries are fully proxied by the receiving end. Accordingly, when you connect a proxy, you will have a DNS proxy here. Connect a VPN, you will have the DNS of your VPN here. In this case, since the exit goes through the DigitalOcean instance, the DNS is corresponding. Let's now see where this DNS is located inside our router. Let's refresh the page. What is very important, the operation of our web page is supported even in VPN mode. What do we pay attention to? The first is the C, the first is the status, the system, the services, the network, the VPN. I will go to the system section, and change the language to English. The language has been changed successfully. Next, what will you collaborate with here? The first is the Services Password tab. On the Password tab, we have this main switch, which allows you to use proxies in T-proxy mode. We will need to install it accordingly if we want to use a proxy. How do we insert proxies here? Go to the node list. Oh, by the way, you can, in case you're wondering, check your connection speed, pings, and the availability of the services you need. Go to the node list. We have a test proxy set here by default, we don't need it. If we want to add a proxy, then we click on the Add button. Well, then select the kernel, respectively, the protocol that you want. For example, SOCKS, enter the port, name, password, TLS support. No one will have any difficulties. This is the simplest possible, but nevertheless, with certain extensions, a panel for installing proxies and working with them. If you're interested, in the next tutorial I can write down how to fine-tune the different types of proxies. But I remind you that on the best proxy service in the world, if you and I use proxies now, we will go into my story. We will see that we have a proxy that connects both via VPN and the X-ray engine. I draw your attention to this. It is very rare to find proxies of such great quality. These are real devices that are in real countries exactly where they need to be. So, let's go back to our router. Further, open VPN tab. Since there are a lot of connections, a lot of users who recommend or prefer to use a VPN, we'll go to the VPN tab. And here we have ready-made configurations. Look, the RW configuration, here it is at the very bottom, it is now active and in no case do not disable it. The RW configuration is a client-server tunnel. That is, if you disable it now, your VPN will crash. I'm currently under a VPN. Just in case, I'll show you now. I have our VPN enabled. But after we set up a VPN here, I will need to reconnect, which I also draw your attention to. So, now our task is to add an additional configuration file here. For example, I'll select US and then click Select File, after which I'll select the file that I downloaded from a web resource with the best detect.expert proxies using the OpenVPN link. Go back to your router and click the Choose File button. So, the file is successfully selected. Next, click the Upload button. And now we see that our file has been successfully uploaded. But at the moment, our file is not ready for use. After all, if we click on the Start button, nothing will happen to us, because this VPN supports authentication by login and password. Accordingly, if you're going to work with VPNs that support login and password authentication, you need to click on the Edit button. And then a little magic. Take our login, copy it, and paste it into this field under the VPN config. Copy the password in the same way. Insert in the field under the VPN config. But there is one more important point. Pay attention to this line of auth user pass. Here, this line in the VPN config indicates that login and password authentication will be used. But we need to specify where the file with this authentication is. And here is a line that will automatically be generated depending on the name of your VPN file. Copy this line and paste it. Press the Save button, and after that, our VPN is ready to go. Go back to the Open VPN tab, check the Enabled box, which means that this VPN will work by default when you boot up the router. And press the Start button. After which we can see that we have 5 unsaved changes in the upper right corner. Click Save and Apply. Sometimes a VPN may not connect immediately. That is, just like on your own computer, sometimes it can take 5 seconds, other times 10 or 15 seconds. In our case, the VPN is now signaling that it is successfully connected. And let's check our IP address. In some cases, the system has time to update, and your IP address will change immediately. In other cases, you will need to disconnect from your VPN and connect to it again. Let's refresh our page. The connection is not active with us. So let's stop the page from refreshing. Disconnect from VPN. Refresh the page and reconnect to the VPN. After that, we refresh our page again. So, we can see that we have successfully connected our IP address. Here he is. It is owned by Verizon. Well, and the MTU is 1500 in this case. What does this mean? Despite the fact that our IP address belongs to the mobile network, I applied a few life hacks, if you can call them that, to mimic our connection as much as possible to the real user one. That is, we can see that even when using the Zardax test, we have the coefficient that we are using, the Windows operating system, is 55%, and the MTU is 1500. I would also like to draw your attention to several important points. The first point is why in this case our MTU values 1500, despite the fact that my real MTU traffic on my internet channel is now only 1420. The fact is that the server itself uses several interesting mechanics to change the user's fingerprint. In this case, we still have a small flaw with TTL, but in the next editions, because this is the alpha edition, we will fix everything and will be 100% consistent with the real user. But nevertheless, even with such parameters, this is already a result that you probably won't achieve with any other software proxy. What do you think? And all this is fully available on the GitHub web resource from Vektor T13 Technologies. Follow the project, leave your reactions, wishes, comments. Plus, if you are a person with a good network skill and you can give development to this project, be sure to contact our supports and we can start mutually beneficial financial cooperation with you, since the support of this project is in the scope of our interests. And most importantly, it will be convenient and interesting for all users. Thank you very much for your attention. you had the Vektor T13 with you,